Thank you for clicking on my video. Going to be talking about the nataruk today. I just wanted to address some things that I had been hearing in my clan, and there was a bit of confusion. First and foremost, for the people that are just looking for a build and to click off, the full scaling build for the nataruk, where it's viral slash, is on the screen with Riven. I highly recommend, because of the low disposition, rolling a quality of life Riven as opposed to a pure damage one. Which you see here, fire rate, toxin, with prime cryo gives you viral, makes enough room to be able to fit the smite mod, or the primed Bane mod. And if this is what you're looking for, here you go. Primary deadhead, obviously. Alright. And for those of you that were just looking for a build, thank you, and the video stops here for you. Okay, talking about the nataruk. I had been hearing some confusion about this bow and how to build it, and I'm just going to talk about some basic builds with scaling mod requirements depending on where you are. The bow is fairly easy to build on principle. To get the most out of it, there are a couple of builds, but I will be covering several parts of it and explaining my philosophy on it. Which will hopefully, for the newer player, the lower MR, or just somebody that doesn't want to learn about the math but still kind of want to understand what's going on, will hopefully help a bit. So first, we're going to have our bargain basement. You were barely able to complete the new war, but you really haven't done Steel Path or arbitrations. This sort of build is going to be what you're able to do. Obviously, there are mod spaces missing. This one has been modded for corrosive, which is malignant force and high voltage. If you don't have either of these, just throw on what you have. You're trying to get through the star chart or just starting to get your foothold in Steel Path, and you have an extra mod slot for whatever you want. With our multipliers, just to go over it, we have base damage, we have multi-shot, crit chance, crit damage, and fire rate. The good thing about this bow, one of its unique characteristics, is the fact that it has an unlimited ammo supply, which takes a lot of headache out, so you don't have to fit your vigilante supplies or your ammo mutation here. You essentially have a free mod slot. And don't worry about the arcanes yet, if you haven't done Steel Path. But if you're still getting through the regular star chart, or you're just starting Steel Path, this is going to be the kind of build that you're looking for. If you have 100 munitions, you should be able to fit it. Swap out these for the 60/60s. And you will have plenty of space for the 100 munitions. If you want to do corrosive because you're fighting Grenier, 100 munitions really isn't a bad idea still, even though it's not viral. You could also put heat in by doing something like this. You could do one of these or even the 90, which you would be able to fit if you didn't have the Forma. And you would be ready to go for base Steel Path. But most of you that are looking at this video have at least done some Steel Path, so you would be looking at a build closer to this. To talk about the logic behind this, just to go over the basics so everybody's on the same page. The nataruk is a bow. It's from the new war. Spoilers if you haven't done it, but I'm assuming you have now. Generally, the goal of this bow is to utilize a mechanic, a perfect shock mechanic. When you hold the bow, a reticle appears with a signifier traveling around it, and if you release the bow in the last third of the circle, it gives you something called a perfect shot. This is really the first time we've had this mechanic, and it gives you incredible stats. 60% crit chance, 2.4 multiplier, 50% status chance, and decent numbers on puncture and slash. 900 base damage. Not bad. When you do a charge shot or a perfect shot, it releases what is essentially a pulse wave instead of an arrow. With infinite punch through. Quick shot is like a regular bow with normal stats, and it does half damage. So obviously, if you're trying to get the most out of the bow, you want to be able to use the charge shot or the perfect shot if you're trying to do alpha damage, the initial hit alpha damage. There is also a build, which I will not be covering, which is revolves around a railjack mod. Internal bleeding with the quick attack, but it is single target, so I won't be covering that because we're looking to get through the star chart. So covering the Steel Path build, we have all of our multipliers. We have our Arcane, Primary Deadhead, which at the time of this recording, April 9th, is 10p. As long as you have Steel Path unlocked and enough Steel Essence to unlock a Primary Arcane slot, and you got 10p and you haven't farmed it up, go buy one if you like this bow. This is not Primary Merciless, so it is very cheap. So talking about the multipliers, we got multi-shot, Galvanized Aptitude, which gives direct damage and status chance. Crit damage, crit chance, corrosive. I put heavy caliber on here for additional base damage, but ultimately for the accuracy decrease. Not that it's a huge one, but it does help. And vial acceleration to be able to throw out more shots, a whole lot more shots. This build is mostly about getting as many arrows, as many pulse waves toward the enemy as possible. And it is also fairly cheap. None of these mods, it takes advantage of some of the vault mods on Deimos when you run the Orokin vaults. If you don't have these, you can swap this out for like a fire rate. Shred is pretty popular on it. Vigilante Fervor or Speed Trigger. So one of these three mods, Shred, Speed Trigger, or Vigilante Fervor. If you don't have Vigilante Fervor, it's a pretty good trade-off if you're running Vigilante Supplies, which is the innate polarity. Speed Trigger is obviously more fire rate. Shred gives fire rate and punch through. There is also another mod, which I don't have yet, 10 days away, called Prime Shred, which is also a really good option because though the pulse wave that you emit has infinite punch through, it does not have infinite punch through walls and objects. It only has infinite punch through enemies. So it does help. But with this build, it's more about volume over quality. So this is more about taking advantage of the fact that the bow does have infinite ammo. Just fire again. But I decided to go with the corrosive build for this, and this does do Steel Path pretty easily. High puncture and corrosive makes it really, really good against Grineer. Just to go over, for those that are newish, search Grineer Weakness Wiki. Grineer Damage tab pulls this up. Don't worry about machinery when you're running around a mission. What you're going to be looking for is alloy and ferrite if you are not used to stripping armor, or you are not running like a primer on your pistol. So the only thing that we're really going to be worrying about is corrosive with ferrite armor, or ally armor. These two right here. Cloned flesh matters, but not as much because most of the things that you're going to be going up against, if not all of them, are going to have some form of armor. So what we're doing is we're just trying to get puncture and corrosive up as much as possible. If you think you are going to be going against higher level enemies, and by higher level I mean in the thousands, you would not be using this build. You would be using a damage over time build because it's essentially free real estate in terms of doing damage. But this is going to be for star chart missions, steel path missions. You just want to one bang something or clear a hallway, and that's all you're going to do. So corrosive, high puncture, you destroy most enemies that are Grineer. This isn't going to help you too much against like elite units, like say for example a Nox or a Bombard. But you will get some additional base damage. So you're only going to be hitting for like 5k, 15k, maybe 50k with a headshot against a Bombard. But it's still plenty enough damage to still kill him. So what we have here is we have our multi-shot status chance to help us proc corrosive more often, which gets us to 150. The 260s, fire rate, base damage, and our critical multipliers. What I have noticed, and here's where I wanted to talk about, as far as like Bane mods go, I've seen some debate on whether or not a Bane mod is good for, say, like a weapon like this. Bane mods do not help you that much compared to other available mods when you are killing something with alpha damage. As in, like when I mean alpha damage, I mean like the first hit. If you are dealing, say, slash damage, or heat, or toxin, or electricity procs, a Bane mod comes in incredibly useful. Also with gas, just to be clear. But if you were trying to hit something and one bang it, heavy caliber does almost as good of a job. It's like, I think like 3% off, but it doesn't double dip. And you also get the damage boost from the conditional status on galvanized aptitude, where you get the damage boost from extra procs. And this is super useful. This weapon isn't, I wouldn't say is like super good as is. It really does shine with the build that I showed at first. But you can still hit for a couple 100k, and on headshots, it'll still do like 2 mil. It's not setting any records as is with this build, but this is practically a free build. It's one forma. I formatted this on here, and even then, you kind of don't need it. You could put like a Bane mod in here, or maybe like a 90 mod, and it would save you some mod capacity. And even now I have mod capacity free. And just to sort of take it down to complete zero, you could even just not unlock this and just run with primary deadhead and two 60/60s and a 90. And it would be perfectly fine. This weapon just doesn't need that much. And it definitely doesn't need a Bane. But if you want to get the most out of it, yes, you do need to run a dot with some sort of status that conditions the dot to increase its effectiveness. So say like corrosive damage with heat, or viral with heat and slash, corrosive and gas. They all work together. All right, sorry about that. Okay, let me show you how it works. Okay, I am running Neja, built to be a brick. Nothing fancy. Guardian Grace. I guess the Vigilante set is going to help out a little bit. No invigoration, and that should be good enough to stay alive. Let's do some Steel Path. Going to do the QoL Fortress. And I'm just going to show a couple minutes of gameplay up to the first acolyte. So if you're good with that explanation, and you just want to see what the acolyte is like, just skip to the end of the video. But if you actually want to see like how it does, see how the headshots do, or see how it clears halls and whatnot, feel free to stay on.
Predictable. As expected, the nataruk shut down the environmental systems, sending modified life support capsules. Use these to sustain your environment or attach to the catalysts to begin harvesting.
Alright, simple enough. You do decent damage to the Acolyte when you're not shooting into his bubble. Those Malice, by the way, make sure to roll to get out of that bubble. You could see the damage going up and down based on the type of enemy that I was shooting. You could get 600, 700 Ks. I think I saw 1 million in there. But even when not picking up air supply, pretty decently capable of staying full. And a lot of that has to do with the AoE effect and the benefit from heavy caliber, where it's more about clearing hallways and just getting your damage on as many enemies as possible. Pardon me, as possible. This build is not about hitting perfect shots. This is like a quality of life build while maintaining as much damage as possible. I would highly recommend it for anybody who just wants a more pleasant playing experience where you don't want to have to worry about the hassle of doing the perfect shot every time. You noticed I was getting a lot of oranges with the occasional red. The reds were from the Vigilante set bonus. And I think that's it. Pretty basic explanation, proof of concept. If you do have Bane mods, you can start swapping over to the damage over time build. If you just want to get more damage straight up, swap to the Bane. It does slightly better. But more importantly, the pulse from the perfect shot and the charge shot will line up a little bit better, so you're going to be getting more status effects on the same enemy further down instead of spreading them to more enemies. Based on the pulses starting to diverge a little bit. So it will increase your damage. And it'll be a slightly bigger multiplier, but then you'll also get from like the occasional slash proc. It does have slash on the perfect shot and the charge shot. There is a slightly different crit chance to it, and the crit multiplier is higher on the perfect shot, but this is more for just running around and just blasting stuff with the charge shot. And you'll be able to hold the bow down on this instead of having to constantly get perfect shots. It's a little bit less damage, but the quality of life is definitely there. And even with Steel Path, it still does damn good. Anyway, thank you for watching the video. I know it ran a little bit long and I rambled, but I just wanted to sort of explain what was going on. And I appreciate y'all for hanging out. Have a wonderful day.